When we think about the millions of years that passed before recorded history, we usually think about dinosaurs. These big monsters were terrifying, but life on Earth existed billions of years before the dinosaurs, and it was very different from what we can imagine. Come with me on a crazy journey from the early days of Earth until the dawn of the dinosaurs. Before anything else, guys, I always like to say in many episodes, we do not like the theory of evolution or any atheistic ideas or all of this talk. We are here discussing scientific content and how science has reached it and how the idea of creating the Earth was made. And we know, of course, that God Almighty is the creator of the entire universe. And there is no more foolishness from the talk of atheism and empty talk. Why should we close the door to empty bidding? It is a good idea for us to start from the beginning. About 4.6 billion years ago, the dust and gas that was beautiful from the formation of the sun gathered together and formed huge space rocks that extend. For hundreds of miles, these rocks collided with each other again and again and eventually merged to form the Earth, although it is certainly not the Earth that you and I know. This Earth was a hellish world, full of volcanoes, radioactive activity, and regular asteroid collisions. And this continued for a very long time, perhaps about 1 billion years. After that, we can rise from about 3 and 7 billion years ago, things started to get interesting. At that time, our planet had cooled significantly and was close to today's temperatures. But that doesn't mean it was a planet that could support life, because it was mostly made up of water, and the atmosphere was almost devoid of oxygen. It was an empty world of raging seas and rocky hills. The only thing we could hear was the sound of the waves constantly crashing against the shore and the volcanic eruptions that happened from time to time. It was a very terrifying thing, but in the depths of the waters of our planet, something completely amazing and confusing happened. Life began to fall. We don't know exactly how, but a combination from the processes and components in the Earth's oceans led to the emergence of very simple, single-celled organisms, which are known as single-celled organisms. Some of these organisms were producing oxygen for billions of years. Of course, they lived a very quiet lifestyle, absorbing any nutrients and producing their own byproducts that they did not need, but very slowly. They began to change and become more complex, and this reached its peak at the beginning of the Cambrian period, which is the Cambrian period, about 538 million years ago. Before the Cambrian period, the land or the Earth was made up of a great desert called Rodinia, even before Pangaea. When the Cambrian period began, this continent was divided into small blocks, the largest of which was Gondwana, in the southeast, but this is not the exciting part. Let's talk about the Cambrian explosion, the greatest biodiversity event in the history of our blue planet. Here, when I say explosion, I do not mean a large fiery explosion. This explosion is metaphorical to describe the huge number of new organisms that appeared. Single-celled life was ancient. Now complex life was the fashion. Most of the basic body forms we see today first appeared at this time. Nearly all crustaceans, mollusks, starfish, and worms evolved under the blast waves. This great diversity continued over tens of millions of years. But given the simple evolution in billions of years ago, this was a huge event that scientists are still discussing about the cause of the Cambrian explosion, or the Cambrian explosion, which is here again a diversity of life, not an explosion in the understood sense. When we came and said that some simple organisms began to produce oxygen, one theory says that they multiplied quickly, and this increased oxygen levels significantly, large, and allowed the emergence of new and more complex life forms, and creatures appeared that were extinct. Life was less, and the evolutionary arms race began that would know the development of life on Earth for camels. Regardless of how the Earth was now ideal for these new breeds of life, the average temperature was warmer than before. In addition to the fact that the increased oxygen and carbon dioxide gave life the opportunity to develop and advance, organisms began to have eyes, mouths, external structures, and shells. All the modifications or developments that occurred to organisms began at this time, even though many of the animals that possessed these modifications still seemed strange. Exactly, let's take the trailing insects for example. These were arthropods covered in species, and we found them all over the ocean, eating plankton, searching for waste, and hunting other animals. We can recognize them because they have many fossils that are still available. The trailing insects were among the most successful animals that ever lived, and they flourished for hundreds of millions of years. But they were not the only thing that appeared during the Cambrian period. For example, the unison, which was a strange worm that had a backbone, although its shape appeared to be without a backbone at all. The first fit, and they looked like this. They were similar to the eels, which are without teeth, and more importantly, this is the moment when the first strange worm and had a backbone, although it seemed completely without a backbone. Other animals were also present and were much stranger, like the opapina, which lived on the bottom and always used its long snout to. It catches small prey and puts them in its mouth all the time, but with the dynamics that are of the predator and the prey, or prey and the predator that became stable, one animal had to stop or go up above the eye. This was a type of strange shrimp, and the ibex was considered the predator or the top predator in this period. This was known as Animalux, and was a little above the bloodline, and this was considered huge at that time, and the oceans were filled with animals with soft bodies like worms, and now with the presence of a predator that was unparalleled in hunting, animals were forced to adapt more to the situation, because evolution had just begun to accelerate, or at least that's what was supposed to happen. Look at that. About 455 million years ago, when everything seemed to be coming together and life was progressing steadily, a catastrophe happened, but no one knows why. But it was a very large drop in oxygen levels, most likely due to volcanic activity. And this led to a mass extinction event, but not all creatures died. Some creatures, such as the trilobite, they kept issuing, but the event that happened was undoubtedly catastrophic. Here, the Cambrian period was officially over,